Hi everyone, Alon and Cindy from Panda. We're here today at Pressure Point, and I've got a special guest. She is a CHRO nominee, and most recently a VP of People at Makosi. Big welcome to Cindy Botha.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being here.
It's great being here.
I think where we start is with your story. I think, we were chatting earlier, and I think having that context will just make this conversation so much more valuable for everyone. So over to you.
Absolutely, thanks. And thanks for having me today. This is really exciting. My story, it feels like it's like starting from a comedy, turning into a drama. Here we are now. So I started my journey by studying marketing. Landed my first opportunity in a recruitment consultant or a recruitment agency, where I had an opportunity to meet a lot of people and connect them with, their dream jobs. That was really exciting, especially the commission earning part of it. But then, I quickly grew into wondering what is happening with all of these people. And I was really, really fortunate to land an opportunity with EY at that stage. They were one of my biggest clients. Joined the internal recruitment team, recruited for predominantly audit and the advisory side. And then that lasted for nearly a year or just over. And then the hunger in me, the curiosity again started. Like, what's happening with all of this talent, like after we bring them in? Where do they go? What do they do? What do they accomplish? We sell the dream. Are they really accomplishing their dream? And what are we doing to support them? So again, EY afforded me the opportunity to go into HR and to explore the HR world, which is really, really exciting. I took a bit of a break when I was at EY. I had both my children. So I became a mommy during that stage as well. And throughout the journey at EY, I really had the opportunity just to work from, like I said, from the recruitment space, the HR space, across the board. Went into the forensics department to assist them at some stage as well. And, that was really just fulfilling. I then got an opportunity to join the British Council. So, which is a 360-degree change.
No more CAs.
Okay. So, together with the team at the British Council, we looked after 21 countries in Africa, and it was an absolute impactful experience, to say the least. The exposure to different cultures, that diversity. And I think I shared it with you earlier, like the one thing that I'll always remember about that journey is how diversity can lead to unity. And that was definitely one of the biggest things that, I'll take away from the British Council and my time there. Had an absolutely amazing time there, absolutely amazing team. And then I got a random phone call, a random message from one of, actually funny story, one of the trainees that I used to work with at EY. And he had joined an organization called Makosi, and wanted to understand, where am I in my career? What's the next step? Would I be open to having conversations with the CEO and going through a process? I was like, well, okay. I really believe that, everything happens, a reason and a season. So jumped into it and just embraced the opportunity just to connect. Right? We always, for me, one of the big things, working with people, engaging with people, it's always really crucial just to take every opportunity to engage and to learn from each other. So I was really open to having a conversation with the CEO, Darren Isaacs. And immediately afterwards, I remember it very vividly. After that conversation with Darren, I was like, wow, so exciting to see how people are deliberately wanting to make an impact and make an improvement, specifically in industries, that is attractive to me as well. So I joined Makosi, it was in 2021, and I joined as head of people, and it was an absolute roller coaster journey. Okay, and it felt like sometimes I was riding that roller coaster without, safety, the safety lock on. It was more maybe of a parachute at that stage. So yeah, joined them 2021 and went through this rapid growth experience.
So I'm just going to pause you there because I want to
Yeah.
chat a lot about Makosi. But before we get into that, I think what's clear is that, passion for people is what drew you to HR. And I just wanted to really pick up on your point around the British Council, because I think it's powerful
Yeah.
and it's something that people preach, but I don't think they've lived it in the way that you've lived it, in that diversity, building unity. But that's not always an easy thing to get right. Again, I think organizations preach it, but we'd just love to share a bit more for our listeners about that. How do you manage to do that? How do you get that right? How do you allow people to be authentic but different and make the the whole better than the sum of the parts?
Absolutely. And I think that, taking a step back, okay, it's called HR for a reason. Okay, so let's maybe look at that. HR, human, and then resources. Okay, so by virtue of that, we can agree that we are all human first. Okay, we all carry a burden. We all have a story to tell. We all have an experience to share. We all bring something unique. So I think, as organizations, we really want to drive diversity and create inclusivity, okay? But like you said, it's not easy because I want something, you want something, we all want something different. But yet, we've got this like shared purpose that we have to achieve. So how do you build a culture where, you bring everything that is different together as one? And I'll openly say, like, my understanding of diversity and inclusion, I had a great picture until I joined the British Council, and I realized, wow, I've got so much to learn. And at first it was overwhelming. Like, I doubted myself. I was like, wow, I have so much to learn. But then if you look at it, it's like, it's an opportunity, it's like, it's there for you. It should be, wow, I've got so much to learn. It should be something exciting. And I think, when you are exposed to that, how do you bring it back? How do you share it? How do you, I think, in one of our earlier conversations, I said to you, like, how do you take a policy and a process and you apply it or you make it work, but keeping in mind that there is so many different cultures, so many different beliefs, so many different, languages. So how do you take something that is process-driven and make it relevant across the board for everyone? And it's not an easy task, and HR professionals can't do it alone. You have to get the buy-in from the people. You have to get the buy-in from the business. And you have to acknowledge where you win, and you have to acknowledge where you fail, and you have to do so openly so that everyone can buy into it. So I think maybe it's not the best advice, but that's the advice that has worked for me. It's like, together with your people and your organization, you build that sense of unity together with all of the differences.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to leading with heart, right?
Yes.
And remembering people are people, not
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, great. And I think it's a great segue to your life at Makosi and the rocket ship or roller coaster that's been over the last few years. So maybe just paint that picture for people, because I think the organization that you joined and the organization that you are recently leaving are two very different organizations. So maybe paint that picture. What was it like when you joined back in 2021?
So when I joined back in 2021, rough numbers, we were quite a small internal team. We had roughly just under 300 consultants. And, it was really from a purpose-driven perspective, the strategy, the objective has always been clear. The impact that Darren, the CEO, had envisioned, that he wanted to enable the industry, enable the profession, right? that has always been very, very clear. And I think that was really critical, especially throughout growth stages. You tend to lose focus on what are we driving, what are we working towards. And the one thing throughout Makosi's journey is like that has always been clear. So that purpose-driven objective was always clear, that clarity around that. I think, starting as a relatively smaller internal team and then very quickly growing to over 100 people internally, over 150 people internally. It felt to me like it happened overnight, okay? Together with the consultants as well, like I just said, just under 300. And then very quickly, I remember our intake, December 21, January 2022, our onboarding, it had 1,500 people. It was absolutely insane. It was exhilarating. Like, the adrenaline was pumping, it was a journey in itself. I compared it to a roller coaster, but it's definitely more than a rocket ship experience, yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there are a lot of points I want to double down on. I think the first is this, that concept, which sounds like Makosi got right through this journey around how do you make sure that those, consultants coming in, that internal team coming in that are growing in a hyper-growth environment where I'm sure expectation was very high, that there was still alignment to the mission. So no matter what your day-to-day looked like, you weren't part of, an individual operating in a silo. You were part of this bigger organization moving towards a mission. How do you think you got that right? How did you instill that culture across the organization?
So I think a few things. I think that the leadership team has always had a vested interest in terms of the objective that it wants to achieve and to drive. And I believe that is still something that has been consistent up to this day. And that is really something that organizations and employees, such as myself, take for granted. That behind the scenes work of, okay, where are we going? Why are we going? That clarity. Without clarity, everyone can just be running in, a million directions, including myself. I do have a bit of that shiny object syndrome, and I want to bring in everything and I want to change everything. And you do need, leaders with that clarity of where are we going and why are we going there, to bring everything together, to bring everything again just to that sense of purpose. Why are we doing this, guys? Okay. Where are we at the moment? Where are we working towards? That small steps, small wins that you need to celebrate just to keep that momentum going. So I think the one thing is that it was absolutely critical is that investment from a leadership perspective, but that sense of clarity. That gave me the clarity that I had to drive within my team or throughout the people strategy at that stage. And I do believe without that, it would not have been a success. So the buy-in from leadership is absolutely critical.
Clearly it filtered down across the organization. So I think a big part of that's obviously that onboarding at scale. I mean, you've got 1,500 people. I mean, that's crazy. Short period of time. Got to get them up to speed quickly. You got to get them bought into the culture, the ethos, the work ethic, the way of doing things. I guess, how did you make that happen?
So I would love to take credit for that. Absolutely. But I think that, Makosi's value proposition and the structure is it just absolutely caters for that, for every single part of the journey. The talent acquisition side, the leader they're in at that stage had a very defined strategy in terms of how to attract the best talent in the market. And once we have them, how do we enable, how do we engage, and how do we grow them? So there were different strategies throughout the journey of Makosi. So I specifically came in the journey. How do we engage? How do we give you a tangible culture, make you experience that sense of belonging whilst growing, and keeping in mind all of our employees are working from home or remote.
There's that curveball, yeah.
So how do you create this tangible culture, give this exhilarating experience, enable growth by doing so while we are not sharing an office? So, attracting the best talent, we had an exceptional leader doing that. growing the talent, engaging the talent, and then, thereafter in terms of like, what is the next? So also when they are at clients, how do we continue engaging? How do we make sure that you deliver? Because we absolutely had the most, top-notch, talent out there. So throughout the structure of Makosi, we had intentionally focus points of like every step of the journey of a consultant to keep them engaged, to keep them challenged, to encourage them, to keep that curiosity going as well. And I really believe like that made the tangible culture that they had experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly saying that you got right, not an easy one in that remote environment. And I mean, just touching on the remote environment, because obviously that, onboarding 1,500 people, complex in itself, onboarding 1,500 people and ensuring that they're performing optimally in a remote environment, even more complex. But like clearly what's clear speaking to you, knowing the organization is there's a strong culture. So and I think part of culture is relationship, and it's obviously possible, and I think testament to Makosi that you've done it. How do you build those relationships in that remote environment?
I think that one of the things that will always stand with me, one of the biggest learning curves for myself, I mean, at a professional and a personal level was, your point of like building those relationships, but possibly not getting an opportunity to do so face to face. And how do you build authentic relationships? Okay, because it's easy to put a PowerPoint slide on. Okay, I can read from the slides and we can all learn from the slides. But how do you take that into, actual something tangible? How do you listen to the feedback and give feedback on what you have just heard? So I think that, again, intentionally wanting to build a relationship on an ongoing matter or an ongoing basis, that is really the key. Like intentionally making time to understand what is happening with your employees, with the teams, with projects, with deadlines. That is really, really critical. So I believe, again, from the first day that I joined, Darren, the CEO, made it very clear, like, people are at the heart of this organization. And the one thing that I learned is that, no business can exist without people. Okay, so equally as important as a business strategy, so is the people strategy. If you want to build a sustainable business, how do you build a sustainable people strategy that will enable that business? So again, just coming back to, the culture and how we really wanted to create like that tangible culture is, celebrating the successes, but also communicating where you failed and owning up. And that's not always easy. I know that, some of the Makosi people will tell you that I always wear leopard print. So I got known for being in leopard print T-shirts, or like always, okay. But like I made a joke with Darren always, and I always used to say, like, if we are jumping on a call with the consultants, we had this amazing, it's like when you bring all of the consultants together, the call was called, or the meeting was called a sikulume, which means come, let's talk. But I always used to wear black or dark colors because those conversations could get very real, very fast. And, we had this one rule of like, be vulnerable. If you don't know the answer, like, say, I don't know the answer. Or if you've made a mistake, like, this is your opportunity to say, dear, over 1,000 consultants, I've messed up, but I'm also only human. But I need you to give me a chance to fix it. And I don't think that is a culture that, number one, we are used to seeing in an organization. Okay, so senior leadership saying, guys, we've messed up. We might have used other words, but like, give me the opportunity to fix it, but I'm going to need your help. So we're not used to that culture. We're not used to operating in an environment like that. And that really creates that sense of like purpose, belonging, but that sense of motivation that, you know what, yes, I will actually help you, leadership. Like, I buy into this now, so you've got my commitment. And that is where the magic happens.
Yeah. I think, again, what really comes through clearly is, that need to just be human and authentic and be
Yeah.
vulnerable, and that, trickle down from the top down. If you believe it and do so in an authentic manner, then the organization lives it. Something that we touched on, and I think you've alluded to it, it's a high pressure environment, it's a remote environment, you're expecting a lot from people, right? And, things it's not always smooth sailing. How did you support people to ensure that they, could perform at that optimal level? And how did you support them and give them that moment to pause if they needed it?
So that's a loaded question. I think having your finger on the pulse, and that can mean a lot of things. Okay, so firstly, having my finger on my own pulse, understanding, where are my shortfalls? Okay, so we talk about putting boundaries in place, and I'll be very open and honest. Sometimes my boundary walls can be a little bit blurry, but when I do break those boundaries, I know that I need to hold myself accountable. Okay, so also understanding that working remotely, some of the team members might be parents, might be traveling, or whatever the setup is. So being very open and honest to say that, guys, between this time and this time, I'm fetching my kids, or I'm going to be next to the rugby field or the netball court. And between this time and this time, I'm doing homework. So yes, I am working at night, but I'm not expecting you to reply. So setting my boundaries, but also communicating my expectations and creating, again, that culture where to say, okay, I've shared mine, so please share yours. And where do we meet in the middle? Okay. I need to run in the mornings. I'm quite an active person. If I don't run, I know I can't bring my best. So please don't set up a meeting before 9 o'clock, team. Okay, because you're not going to get the best out of me, because it means that I'm going to have to rush my morning routine. But that also doesn't work for everyone. There might be early birds in the team. So how do you make that compromise? So I think, again, taking a step back, understanding what works for you, what works for me, and meeting in the middle. And that is possible. It is definitely possible. I know, there might be a lot of people rolling their eyes to say, look, my team is 35. How is that possible? It is possible. There is if we can get 50 people in one meeting, I can guarantee you can make it work, meeting people at random times as a team as well. So getting to understand what is the different setup and what will work for everyone, so that we have clarity on what we need to achieve by when. So that's the first thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Does. And it's a simple one, right? It sounds obvious. It's communication, right? But we just don't do it. You don't manage expectation. You don't tell people what you need. But yeah, it's so simple.
It is. And I think that maybe the downfall is that it's easy to communicate your expectation, okay? But are we always receptive of hearing it back?
Yeah.
That's the key point. It's not what I want to hear. Okay, no, I can't meet you at 1 o'clock because I need to fetch my kids. But so how do we compromise? So, and communicate. And I've had to learn that at some stages I've been a bad communicator. I was bad at communicating and negotiating, to be honest. So how do you build the courage to say, okay, guys, I really tried this, but it's really disruptive. I cannot do it, and this is the reason. And how do you bring it forward to say, for me to be my best and to bring my best, this is what I would love to achieve and how. So again, just coming together and just bashing it out.
Yeah. No, I think it's, again, practical, it's implementable, and we just need to do more of it. I think another point that you touch on is, this concept of balance, right? I think, it sounds like, just hearing you, right? You've got balance, you make time to run, you make time for family, you support your kids within the sports field, but you still work hard, right? You've got that outlet, you've got that variety, and you find time for yourself. And I think it's also that concept of, the airplane analogy around putting on your oxygen mask before you try and help those around you. You've got to do that as well. Something else, though, that you touched on is having your pulse on the organization. Easier to do if you're a smaller team, easier to do if you're in the office with people. Both those things were not true in your case. So how do you keep your finger on the pulse?
That's a really great question. I think my first response is going to be like survey, okay? But then I'm thinking in my head like everyone's got survey fatigue, okay, and rightfully so. But for me, the one thing that really worked was different surveys, and how do we get information? How do you get that feedback from employees? And how do you start being creative in the way in which you get that feedback? So I spoke about a Sikulume, where we had different leaders join the call and we gave feedback.
So was this like really like open town hall? Anyone could
open town hall. So we had quarterly town halls. A Sikulume, what we had asked some of the consultants, well, Rockstar consultants beforehand, is like, share your questions, okay, and we'll address them. So if you get like 100 questions, you soon realize what is the theme of the question. So what we then did is like we consolidated some of the questions into themes, and we gave feedback throughout those themes. But the magic about a Sikulume was like it's live, firstly, which again, hashtag wear dark colors, sweating bullets. And then, like secondly, we were open and vulnerable to say like, okay, great, live questions. And, people had the liberty to say, you guys just ignored my question, which I had submitted, thank you, but let me ask it now. So I think, giving people that opportunity in terms of, for an organization, that is the listening strategy that you have to drive, or that you need to drive, okay? Big difference between listening and hearing. Like, you can hear the voice of your employees, but to active listen, that is really something that you have to like intentionally build. And that is the one part. That's the easy part. You can definitely listen and get all of the questions and, the feedback. What are you doing with it? And how do you take your employees or your team or like your leadership through, like, how do you take them along their journey? This is what you guys have highlighted or asked. This is where we started, and this is the journey that we are going to be embarking on. And hold us accountable. Like, this is our commitment, but hold us accountable. So, it's being vulnerable. It's sometimes overwhelming, and it's a bit scary, okay? Because anything can happen. But like having your employees, having your team members like supporting you and believing in you throughout their journey, that's absolutely magical. Yeah.
And I think it comes down to trust, right? They wouldn't believe in you, they didn't trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, just again to pick up on what you've said, I think the listening is critically important, and making sure people are heard. I don't think that necessarily always means you need to agree.
Yes.
But if you don't agree, then you need to communicate your reasons for not agreeing, or explain why, they asked for, Nando's on a Monday, and it's not Nando's on a Monday. What's the reason for that? Just explaining your thought process, or the conversation happens behind closed doors, and it happens for a reason, providing some level of context to employees so they feel that they were consulted or at least included in some way in that discussion.
It is, and I think, look, I'll forever be grateful to Darren, Lindsay Gull, who recently joined the Makosi team as CPO as well. Like, I've had to continuously learn that there's, different layers of communication. And what I mean by that is like, it's not to say that if you agree something internally, in a meeting, that you can just take it as it is. Like, there's steps of like communicating it over and over again so that everyone is aware, okay? And I think like that is really critical. Where there's a gap in communication, that gap gets bigger in your strategy. That is simply put, the biggest risk for any organization. When employees feel that, communication is happening behind closed doors, it creates that level of like uncertainty, anxiety, which then leads to pressure points, right? And distress, which impacts like well-being, health, sick leave. It becomes this vicious circle. Rather communicate, like address the unknown, address the anxiety. And that's something that I've had to learn, because it's not always, not a lot of corporates operate in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's a unique culture, and there was, the special ingredient there to, make sure the rocket ship could achieve what it could. And
Definitely.
I think testament to the hard work of you, your teams, and I think it comes down to the pillars of really communication, trust, and authenticity. I think it's really clear speaking to you and hearing that come through. So yeah, really appreciate the time. It's been great chatting. It's flown by. A big thank you to Cindy for joining us today. I think so much to learn from. If they've done it in an organization, growing at that scale, being remote, in probably coming off the back of the pandemic in 2021 as well, then I think communication is something that we can all take back to our own organizations. And it's clear the impact from strong communication, building trust, and communicating in a way that's authentic, has a business benefit. So prioritize that. Listen to yourself, listen to your own pulse, listen to your employees, and build together, because I think you're not going to build it on your own. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.